You know what frustrates me most about covering this team? It's not the big splashy moves that dominate headlines for weeks. It's the quiet stuff, the roster gymnastics that happen in the background while everyone's distracted by free agency rumors and MVP celebrations. And yesterday, the Dodgers made one of those moves that looks completely insignificant on the surface but tells you everything about how this front office operates. They traded Robinson Ortiz to the Mariners for Tyler Goff, and I guarantee most of you scrolled right past that notification without thinking twice. But stick with me here, because what just happened reveals way more about the Dodgers' plans than you realize. Let me set the scene for you. 10 days ago, the Dodgers added Ortiz to their 40-man roster. That's the list of players who are protected from being selected by other teams, the ones the organization values enough to keep locked down. So you'd think if they just added him, he must be important, right? That's the logical conclusion. Except, here's the twist. They added him purely to trade him. That wasn't about protecting a valuable asset they wanted to develop. That was about extracting value from a player who was about to walk away for nothing. Here is how this actually works, and yeah, it's complicated, but bear with me because this stuff matters. Ortiz was about to become a minor league free agent. That means he could have signed with any team he wanted, and the Dodgers would have gotten absolutely nothing in return. Zero compensation. Just watch a guy they've invested time and resources into developing put on someone else's uniform, but by adding him to the 40-man roster right before the deadline, they created leverage. Suddenly, they could shop him around, see what teams were interested, and actually get something back instead of losing him for free. The Mariners bit immediately. They wanted Ortiz badly enough to give up Tyler Goff as a young right-hander with some upside, but also some serious question marks. And that's when you start to realize this trade isn't really about either player. It's about roster manipulation. It's about setting up for what comes next. Because right now, the Dodgers' 40-man roster sits at 38 players, which means they have 2 open spots. And in case you haven't been paying attention, here is a Rule 5 draft coming up in December, and those open spots suddenly become extremely valuable. Now, before your eyes glaze over at the mention of the Rule 5 draft, let me break down why this matters. Every December, teams have an opportunity to select unprotected players from other organizations' minor league systems. If you draft someone, you have to keep them on your major league roster all season, or you have to offer them back to their original team. It's a weird rule designed to prevent teams from hoarding talent in the minors, and it creates some interesting opportunities for smart front offices. The Dodgers clearly have their eye on someone, maybe multiple players, and they needed roster space to make a claim. That's why Ortiz got traded despite having legitimate value. The guy had a solid 2024 season in the minors, a 2.73 ERA across 48 appearances, good strikeout numbers, solid command. He's a 25-year-old left-hander who could have competed for a major league role at some point. But the Dodgers looked at their roster construction, looked at what's available in the Rule 5 draft, and decided those open spots were worth more than what Ortiz could provide. That's cold-blooded roster management, and it's exactly why this organization stays competitive year after year. What's interesting is the timing of all this. Just last week, the Reds claimed Ben Kasparius off waivers, which removed another player from the 40-man roster. So between losing Kasparius and trading Ortiz, the Dodgers suddenly have flexibility they didn't have 2 weeks ago. That's not a coincidence. This is coordinated planning, the front office seeing opportunities develop and positioning themselves to capitalize. They're playing chess while most teams are still figuring out checkers. Now let's talk about Tyler Goff for a second, because even though he's not the point of this trade, he's still an actual human being who's now part of the organization. He's 21 years old, 6'2", and he didn't pitch at all in 2025 because he's recovering from Tommy John surgery. Yeah, you heard that right. They traded for a guy who just had his elbow rebuilt and won't be ready to contribute for at least another season. That should tell you everything about how the Dodgers view this deal. Goff is a lottery ticket, a low-risk flyer on a kid who showed some promise before getting hurt. Looking at his 2024 numbers before the injury, you see a mixed bag. He went 7-4 with a 4.33 ERA in 23 starts. 95 innings, pitched 99. Strikeouts, which is solid but not spectacular. His best pitch is supposedly his changeup, which grades out as a potential plus offering. if he can regain his pre-surgery form. His fastball sits low 90s, his slider needs work, and his command was always going to be a question mark, even before the surgery. So basically, you're looking at a guy who might develop into something useful in 3 or 4 years if everything breaks right, but who could just as easily never make it past AA. But here's the thing that nobody's really talking about. The Dodgers didn't need Ortiz specifically because they're loaded with left-handed bullpen arms. What they actually need are right-handers who can handle high-leverage situations. That's been the weak spot for years now. So even though Ortiz had better numbers and more immediate upside, he didn't fit what the roster actually needs. Goff, despite the injury and the uncertainty, at least throws right-handed, which makes him more valuable to the organization's long-term plans. It's brutal math, but that's how roster construction works. At this level, the bigger picture here is what this move signals about the Dodgers' approach to the entire offseason. They're not sitting back waiting for the big names to make decisions. They're actively working every angle, finding value in places other teams overlook, and setting themselves up to be aggressive when opportunities present themselves. Those 2 open roster spots aren't just administrative details. They're ammunition. They're the difference between being able to claim someone in the Rule 5 draft or missing out because you don't have room. And that's what kills me about how most people will react to this trade. They'll see the names Robinson, Ortiz, and Tyler Goff, shrug, and move on with their day. They won't understand that this move is part of a larger strategy that every roster decision connects to 5 other decisions down the line. The Dodgers are building something here. And it's not just about acquiring the best players. It's about maintaining flexibility, about having options when everyone else is locked into rigid plans. Think about what we know is coming. There are free agents the Dodgers are rumored to be interested in. There are potential trades being discussed. T here is the closer situation that still needs addressing. And now, T here is this Rule 5 draft where they clearly have targets in mind. All of these things are connected, and moves like trading Ortiz are what make the bigger moves possible. You can't just focus on the headline acquisitions and ignore the foundational work that enables those splashes. What really gets me thinking is who they're targeting in the Rule 5 draft. The reports are vague, obviously, because teams don't broadcast their intentions before these things happen. But you don't create 2 roster spots unless you have specific players in mind. Someone, maybe multiple someones, caught the front office's attention. Maybe it's a power arm stuck in another organization's system. Maybe it's a position player who can provide depth. Whatever it is, the Dodgers think it's worth sacrificing a legitimate prospect like Ortiz to make room. The risk here is obvious. Rule 5 picks have to stay on the Major League roster all season or get offered back. That's a huge commitment for an unproven player. You are essentially burning a roster spot on someone who might not be ready for prime time. And if they struggle, you are stuck with them because sending them down means losing them entirely. That's why most Rule 5 picks don't work out. Teams take swings on high upside guys who are quite ready, and more often than not, it doesn't pan out. But when it does work, it can be franchise altering. Think about some of the successful Rule 5 picks over the years. Johan Santana, Josh Hamilton, Roberto Clemente, for crying out loud. Obviously, those are extreme examples, but they prove the concept. Sometimes there are legitimate major league players sitting unprotected in minor league systems, and if you are smart enough to identify them and brave enough to take the risk, you can steal incredible value. The Dodgers clearly think they found someone worth the gamble. What strikes me most about all of this is how it reflects the organization's philosophy. They're not sentimental. They don't hold on to players just because they drafted them or because they've been in the system for years. If someone doesn't fit the plan, if T here is a better use for that roster spot, they make the move without hesitation. That's cold, sure, but that's also how you sustain excellence. You can't afford to get attached to names when you are trying to build a dynasty.